She walked into Chapel Bend on the first cold morning of October with a flour sack held against her chest and no other thing in the world to her name. The sack was empty of flour. It held a hairbrush with 3 teeth missing, a tin cup, a folded apron, and a letter she had read so many times the creases had gone soft as cloth. She carried it the way a woman carries something valuable, both arms under it, and that was the first thing Silas Merritt noticed about her from the wagon seat outside the feed store. Not the dust on her hem, not the boots that had been mended twice by someone who was not a cobbler. The way she held the sack. "You lost, ma'am." She looked up. Her face was thin and her eyes were steady, and she did not look lost at all. "I was told there was work here." "Told by who?" "By a man in Rock Springs who wanted my last $2 for the answer." She shifted the sack. "He got them." Behind Silas in the wagon bed, a small voice said, "Papa." He did not turn. "Not now, Nell. Papa. She's cold." The woman heard it. Silas watched her hear it. Something moved across her face and was gone again, quick as a bird crossing a window, and she looked past him at the child in the wagon bed with her knees drawn up under a blanket that had once been blue. "I'm not cold," the woman told her. "But thank you for the noticing." Nell Merritt was 7 years old and had not spoken to a stranger in 11 months. Silas turned around in his seat then. His daughter was sitting up straight with the blanket fallen off one shoulder, looking at the woman with the flour sack the way she used to look at her mother coming up the porch steps. "Get in the wagon," Silas said. He heard how it came out. Flat, hard, an order given to a hired hand. The woman's chin lifted a half-inch. "I don't get into wagons with men I haven't been introduced to." "Silas Merritt. I run the Broken Ash, 4 miles north. My cook quit in August and my hands have been eating scorched beans since. If you can put a meal on a table without poisoning 9 people, I'll pay you $11 a month and give you the room off the kitchen." Adelaide Rook. She said it plainly. "Addie, can you cook, Miss Rook? I cooked for a logging camp of 40 men for 2 years. Why'd you stop?" "The camp burned." She held his eyes. "Not by my hand." Silas looked at her a long moment. Then he stepped down and took the flour sack out of her arms before she could stop him and set it in the wagon bed beside his daughter, gentle, like it was full of eggs. "Room small," he said. "Stove smokes when the wind comes north. I've slept in worse than small." She climbed up herself. She did not take the hand he had not offered. The Broken Ash sat in a fold of brown grass, with the mountains standing off behind it like something that had been there first and knew it. Addie counted as they came in: a bunkhouse with a sagging ridgeline, a barn that had been painted once, corral rails gone silver with weather, 9 head of horses that looked better fed than anything else on the place, which told her more about Silas Merritt than an hour of conversation would have. The house was long and low and gray. Smoke came thin from the chimney. "Boy inside is Tom," Silas said as he pulled up. "He's 4. He doesn't talk much either." She let that word sit where it fell. The kitchen stopped her at the doorway. It was not dirty. That was the strange part. Someone had wiped it down over and over, the way you clean a room you are afraid to be in. But the flour crock was empty and skinned with old dust. A pot of something gray sat cold on the stove. On the sill above the washbasin was a row of small things arranged with terrible care. A blue thimble, a brown bottle, a pressed sprig of something that had once been a flower, a woman's hair comb, tortoiseshell, 1 tooth broken. Nobody had touched that sill in a year. Addie knew it the way she knew when bread had gone past proving. "Ranch eats at 6, Silas said behind her. "There's a smokehouse out back with maybe some ham left. Flour's in the barn, the good barrel. I moved it out there, because of the mice. Coffee's in the cupboard. He stopped. She could hear him working up to something and failing at it. There's nothing in here that's set the way it ought to be. Move what you need. And the sill. A long pause. Leave the sill. All right. He went out. Through the window she watched him cross the yard, with his shoulders set like a man walking into wind that was not blowing. Addie set her flour sack down on the table, took out the apron, and tied it on. She found the ham. She found 4 wrinkled onions and a bin of potatoes that had begun to sprout, and a crate of dried apples nobody had opened. She hauled flour from the barn in the sack she had carried into town with, which struck her as a small joke God was having, and she got the stove hot and the biscuits cut and the ham frying by 4:30. That was when she heard breathing behind her. She did not turn around. She had learned that with skittish things a long time ago. She went on rolling. There's a chair by the window, she said to the stove, if a person wanted to sit. The breathing stayed where it was for the space of 10 heartbeats. Then boots. Small ones. The chair scraped. Addie turned enough to see her. Nell had brought her blanket and had it over her lap and was watching the biscuits like they were a thing being born. You want to cut them? Nell shook her head. All right. She cut 9 and set them in the pan, and then, without any change in her voice, she cut a 10th one that was smaller than the others and set it in the middle, and she went on to the ham. At 6 o'clock, the hands came in and stopped in the doorway like men who had walked into the wrong house. 7 of them. They took off their hats without being told, which Addie noted, and one old fellow with a beard like a hedge said, "Lord God," and then apologized for it. Silas came in last carrying Tom on his hip. The boy had his father's dark hair, and his face was buried in his father's collar, and he did not lift it. The table went quiet when the ham came down. It went quieter when the biscuits came. Addie was at the stove with her back turned when she heard the sound of a plate being set. She looked. Nell had gotten down from her chair and had taken a plate from the dresser and put it at the far end of the table, opposite her father, at the place that had a chair pushed in tight and had plainly had nobody in it for a long while. She set a fork by it. She set the small biscuit on it, the 10th one, the one that had come out shaped a little wrong. Then she looked at Addie and did not say anything at all. Every man at that table found something to look at that was not the far end of it. Addie dried her hands on the apron. She walked over and pulled the chair out and sat down in it, and she picked up the fork, and she said, "Somebody pass the ham before it goes cold." The talk came back up slow, like water finding its level. Silas Merritt did not say one word for the whole meal. But when Addie glanced up once, he was looking at his daughter, and his jaw was working, and he put his hand flat on the table for a moment, the way a man does when the floor has shifted under him. That night he stopped her in the kitchen doorway. "That's her mother's place. I know it." Nell said it. She did. He was quiet. Outside a horse blew in the dark. "Mary passed last November," he said. "Fever. It took her in 9 days. Nell hasn't spoke to a stranger since, and Tom quit talking altogether around Christmas." Addie folded the towel over the rail. She did not fill the silence, because she had learned that men like this one only ever said the true part after you let the quiet run long enough to be uncomfortable. "She hasn't set that place since the day of the burying," Silas said. "Then I'd say your girl knows something." "Knows what?" "I couldn't tell you, Mr. Merritt. I only got here this morning." She untied the apron. "Breakfast is at 5. The stove wants a new damper. I'll want to look at the smokehouse in daylight, and I'll want to know why there's a barrel of good flour sitting in a barn while the crock in this room is empty." He almost smiled. She saw the edge of it before he put it away. "Kitchen's yours," he said. "Whatever you need in it, take it." That's a large thing to hand a woman you met at 9 this morning. It's been nobody's for a year. It's yours." He put his hat on to go out to the bunkhouse. At the door he stopped. "Leave the sill. I heard you the first time." The first week she learned the shape of the place. She learned that Silas Merritt got up at 4 and worked until he could not see, and that this was not diligence, it was a man outrunning something. She learned the hands were owed 2 months of wages and had not brought it up, which meant they were staying for reasons other than money. She learned that Tom would eat if you put food in front of him and left the room, and would not if you watched. She learned that the broken ash was in trouble. It was in the ledger she was not supposed to read and had read anyway while looking for the household accounts. It was in the fact that Silas had sold 20 head in September, when a man with sense holds until spring. And she learned that Nell followed her. Not close. Never close. The child would be in the doorway, or on the step, or at the corner of the barn when Addie went for eggs. She did not speak. Addie did not make her. On the 4th day, Addie set a bowl of dough on the table and a smaller bowl beside it, and said to the air, "Hands get washed at the basin," and went out to the smokehouse for 10 minutes. When she came back, the small bowl had been kneaded by somebody with hands the size of a sparrow, badly, with too much flour. And Nell was sitting in the window chair with her chin up like she was daring the world to comment. Addie baked it. She put it on the table at supper and told the hands it was Nell's, and the old fellow with the beard, whose name was Pruitt, ate 2 pieces and declared it the best bread ever made in the territory, which was a lie so kind Addie forgave him the noise. Nell smiled. It was small, and it went away fast. But Silas saw it, and Addie saw him see it, and he got up from the table and went outside and stood in the yard for a while with his back to the window. On the 6th day, she found the thing the ranch needed. She had gone down to the spring house because the milk was souring in a single day, and that made no sense in October. The spring house was built over the creek and had been built well once, but the channel had silted and shifted, and the water was running around the stone box instead of through it, and the whole place was sitting in still air like an oven. She got a spade. She was 40 minutes into moving gravel, with her skirts pinned up, when Pruitt found her and swore and went to get Silas. Silas came at a walk that was nearly a run. "Miss Rook." The channel silted. She did not stop digging. "You've been losing your milk and your butter and I'd guess most of a hog every fall, because this box has been sitting dry since the spring flood. There's a shelf of gravel here about the length of a man. Move it and the water comes back through." He stood there. "How'd you know to look? I cooked for 40 men in a camp with no ice house. You learn what cold is worth." She straightened and pushed the hair off her forehead with her wrist. "You going to stand there, or you going to take the spade? You're bigger than me, and I'm not proud." Silas Merritt laughed. It surprised them both. It came out rusty and short like a door that had not been opened in a season, and he stopped it fast. But it had happened, and Pruitt up the bank turned around with his mouth open. He took the spade. He worked for an hour, and she carried gravel in the flour sack because it was the only thing to hand, and when the water finally turned and came slapping cold into the stone box, Silas stood in it up to his boot tops and looked at her with his hat pushed back. "A year," he said. "A year I've been buying ice off the railroad twice a month. You've been busy. I've been blind." He climbed out. He looked at her a long moment, standing there wet to the knee with a spade in his hand. "You've been on this place 6 days. 7 tomorrow, Miss Rook." He stopped. Whatever he had meant to say, he could not get it up out of the ground where it was buried. He put his hat straight instead. "Supper at 6, he said, which was the thing she said to him every day, and he walked off with his ears red. She stood in the creek smiling, in a way she was glad nobody could see. The trouble came up the road on a Tuesday in a buggy with a fringed top. His name was Devereaux Hale, and he held the paper on the broken ash, or the bank he sat on the board of did, which came to the same thing when the man was standing in your yard. He was pleasant. That was the worst of it. He took his hat off to Addie and called her ma'am and admired the biscuits, and then he sat at Silas Merritt's table and explained in a warm voice that the note was called for the 1st of December, and that $1,100 would settle it, and that of course, an arrangement could be reached. "What arrangement?" Silas said. "Sell me the north section. The water on it. I'd be generous. That water runs the whole outfit. Then sell me the outfit." Hale smiled. "I'm not a hard man, Merritt. I've watched you since Mary passed. You're a good stockman drowning in a thing too big for one pair of hands and 2 motherless children. Nobody in this county would think less of you for setting it down." Addie was at the stove with her back to them, and she felt the whole room go tight. "Get out of my house," Silas said. "1st of December, Hale said, and put on his hat, and on his way out he paused by Addie and said kindly, "You seem a capable woman. When it goes, come see me. I always need capable." She waited until the buggy was gone from the yard. Then she said, "$1,100. That ledger wasn't for you." "No, it wasn't. And I read it anyway, and you can dismiss me for it after supper." She turned around. "You have 460 head. You sold 20 in September at a bad price because you needed cash in a hurry, and the price was bad because you shipped them from Rock Springs like everybody else does, which is why the buyers there set the price, and not you." Silas stared at her. "There is an Army contract post at Fort Bridger," she said, "that buys beef on the hoof, and pays on delivery, and pays better than any buyer in Rock Springs will pay you for the simple reason that they are not buying to resell. The camp I cooked for sold them timber for 2 years. I know the quartermaster's name. It is Hollis. He is a fair man and a greedy eater, and if you sent him 90 head with a decent drover, you would clear the 1,100 with room left to pay your men." The kitchen was very quiet. "It's a 9-day drive," Silas said slowly. "In November. Then you'd best not stand around. If I take 9 men off this place for 18 days, there's nobody here but you and 2 children and a bunkhouse cook who's 71 years old. Pruitt is a great deal of use for 71. Miss Rook. Mr. Merritt." She untied the apron and hung it up because her hands wanted something to do. "You are going to lose this land in 6 weeks. You are going to lose the barn your wife's initials are cut into on the doorpost, which I have seen, and the room where your son was born. And your girl is going to grow up in a town house in Chapel Bend, remembering that there used to be a place with a creek in it. I have been a woman with nothing but a flour sack. I have carried everything I own into a town in both arms. I would not wish it on a child." He looked at her for a long time. "Why do you care?" he said. It was not cruel. It came out almost frightened. Addie did not answer that, because the true answer had arrived in her somewhere around the 4th day, and she was not ready to say it out loud in a cold kitchen to a man who had a shelf of his wife's belongings on the sill. 6 o'clock, she said. There's apple pudding. He rode for Fort Bridger in the morning to see the quartermaster. He was gone 4 days. On the second night the wind came out of the north, and the stove smoked, exactly as he had promised it would, and Addie sat up with Tom on her lap because the boy had woken crying and would not be put down. He had never let her hold him. Not once in 3 weeks, but at 2 a.m. with the wind hunting around the eaves he had come out of the dark in his nightshirt and stood in front of her chair and lifted both arms, and she had picked him up without a word, and he had gone to sleep with his fist wound into the collar of her dress. She sat there until dawn and did not move because moving would have ended it. Nell found them there at first light. The girl stood in the doorway a long while. Then she said, out loud, in a voice like a hinge, "He does that with Papa." It was the first thing she had said to Addie in 3 weeks. Does he? Only Papa. Nell came closer. She looked at her brother's fist in Addie's collar. Not anybody. Then I'm honored. Nell put her hand out and, very carefully, put one finger on the back of Addie's hand where it lay under Tom's knee. She left it there. Then she took it back. "Are you going to go?" she said. Addie kept her voice level with an effort that cost her more than the Springhouse had. "Why would I go? Everybody goes. Some people stay." Mama didn't. Your mama didn't choose it. Addie shifted the boy's weight. That's a different thing entirely from going, and when you're older you'll know it, and I'm sorry you have to wait for older. Nell considered this with the terrible seriousness of 7. "I put your name on the flower crock," she said. "You what?" "On the paper." "On the crock." She scuffed her heel. "So it's yours. So nobody puts a different one." Addie Rook sat in a smoking kitchen with a sleeping child on her and found she could not see the doorway very well for a moment. "Go get the eggs," she said. "Both baskets. It's cold. Take your coat." Nell went. Addie heard the door and then heard it open again, and Nell's head came back around the frame. "It's a good kitchen now," she said, and was gone. Silas came back on the 5th day with the contract in his coat and a hard set to his mouth. "Hollis will take 92 head at $26 a head," he said. "Delivered by the 22nd. Pruitt whistled. Addie did the arithmetic on the table edge with a wet finger and looked up. $2,392. Enough for Hale, and enough for wages, and enough for a new damper on that stove. He put his hat on the peg, which he had never once done, and stood there in his own kitchen, looking like a man in somebody else's. "We leave Thursday. 18 days out and back. I'll put up food for the drive. Miss Rook." He waited until she looked at him. The quartermaster said the last person who did business with him out of a logging camp was a cook named Rook who kept the books, ran the commissary, and once talked a freight agent down 40%. He has a long memory. He said you could have had the camp if you'd wanted it. "The camp burned, Mr. Merritt. He told me how." Silas's voice went low. "He said the foreman set it for the insurance and let the men think it was the cookhouse stove. He said you were run out of the county on his word and never got a chance to answer it." Addie set the bowl down very carefully so as not to break it. "That's a great deal of talk about a cook," she said. I asked. Why? He did not answer that any more than she had answered him. They left Thursday before light, 9 men, 92 head, and a wagon. Addie stood on the step with Tom on her hip and Nell against her side and watched the dust go north, and when it was gone, she went in and started the bread, because that was what there was to do. Hale came on the 9th day. She saw the buggy from the window and she took her apron off and met him in the yard, which was a thing she had decided on the first day the men were gone. "Mr. Merritt's not here. I know it. The whole county knows it. 90 head to Fort Bridger." He smiled from under the fringe. That was a clever thought. "Whose was it?" "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." He got down. "I'll be plain with you, Miss Rook. There's no cattle contract that beats what I could pay you. Housekeeper at my place in town. $20 a month, your own room with a window on the street, and no bunkhouse to feed. You'd be out of the wind by Christmas. And the broken ash comes to me in December regardless. Merritt will be 4 days late with that money. I've had a look at the weather and so have you." He said it pleasantly. "The road over the divide closes with the first hard snow, and it is coming. He'll be sitting at Green River watching it fall with a pocket full of army paper that does me no good on the 1st. Addie stood very still. You'd hold him to the day. I'd hold anyone to the day. That is what a day is for. Then you have wasted a drive out here, because I'm not for hire. Miss Rook. Hale's voice softened, and that was when she truly disliked him. You came into this town with a flour sack. I know what's in a life like that. He can't pay you. Did you know that? He has not paid a hand since August. You are working for a room and a stove that smokes. He put his hat back on. There is no sense in going down with a place that is not yours. Behind Addie, the door opened. Nell came out onto the step. She had her coat on wrong, one shoulder up. She came down into the yard and walked past the buggy and past Devereaux Hale without looking at him, and stood directly in front of Addie and turned around, so that her back was against Addie's skirts and her face was to the man, and she reached back with both hands and took 2 fistfuls of Addie's dress and held on. She lives here, Nell said. Hale opened his mouth. Her name is on the crock, Nell said. In the kitchen. It's her kitchen. My papa gave it to her and I wrote it, and you can go away now. Addie put her hands on the child's shoulders. You heard her, she said. It's her house. Devereaux Hale looked at the two of them for a moment with an expression she could not read, and then he did the only decent thing she ever saw him do, which was to take off his hat to a 7-year-old girl before he got back in his buggy and drove away. The snow started that night. It came thin, and then it came seriously, and by morning the fence lines were gone. Addie kept the stove hot, and the children close, and the cows milked and counted days, and Pruitt limped the yard twice a day and said not one word about the date, which was how she knew he was counting, too. The 1st of December came on a Tuesday with the sky the color of a dirty plate. Nobody came up the road. She made supper anyway. She set the table for 9 anyway, and Pruitt sat down and looked at all those empty plates and got up again and went out to the barn. At 4 in the afternoon, on the 2nd of December, Nell was at the window and said one word. Papa. They came out of the white with their hats crusted and their horses walking. 9 men. 18 days and a snowstorm and a divide, and Silas Merritt got down in his own yard and stood holding the saddle horn for a second like a man who was not certain his legs would take it. Addie got the door open, with the children pushing past her. He had Tom in one arm and Nell hanging off the other before he had taken 3 steps, and over their heads he looked at Addie standing in the doorway with the light behind her, and he said, "We're a day late." I know it. Hale's had the sheriff's man sitting in the bank since Monday morning, waiting on the hour. I know that too. Then it's done, he said, and there was no anger in it, which was somehow the worst of all. 92 head sold and a pocket full of money, and I am 1 day late for it. Addie stepped back to let him in. Wash, she said. There's stew and there's coffee. Then look on the sideboard. Miss Rook, look on the sideboard, Mr. Merritt. He looked. There was a paper on it. It was a receipt from the Chapel Bend Bank, dated the 30th of November, marked paid in full against the note held on the Broken Ash Ranch, $1,100 and no cents, signed by the teller and witnessed by Devereaux Hale himself, in a hand that had pressed hard enough to tear. Silas stood with it in both hands and did not speak. You'll want to know where it came from, Addie said. I want to know a great many things. You have 400 head of cattle on this place, and you had $1,100 of value standing in that spring house the day I got here, and you could not see it, because you were carrying too much. She wiped the table that did not need wiping. I sold nothing of yours. I went to town on the 28th in the wagon with Pruitt driving, and I took a contract to the Union Pacific section chief for winter beef, 40 head at market, delivery in April, and I took the paper on that contract to the bank as security, and the bank took it because it is a better piece of paper than anything Hale has ever put in front of them. and I put up the rest myself." "The rest? $310. Silas turned around. "You told me you came into that town with $2 gone and nothing but a flour sack." "I did." "Then where?" "From my mother's house," Addie said. "It was sold when she died, and the money sat in a bank in Laramie for 9 years because it was not enough to start anything with, and it was too much to spend on nothing. I have carried the passbook in the lining of that flour sack from the logging camp to Rock Springs to your yard, and I have been hungry in front of it more than once, and I never once opened it." She met his eyes. "I was saving it for a place. The kitchen was so quiet she could hear the stove." "You spent it on mine," he said. "No, Addie. It was the first time he had used her name." She kept her hands on the table because they had begun to shake. "I spent it on the one your daughter wrote my name in," she said. Silas Merritt set the paper down on the sideboard. He walked past her. She thought for one long dropping moment that he was leaving the room, and then she understood he had gone to the windowsill, and she turned to watch him because she could not help it. He stood in front of the sill for a while with his back to her. The blue thimble, the brown bottle, the pressed sprig, the tortoiseshell comb with the broken tooth. Then he picked them up, one at a time, and put them into his hat, careful as a man handling something living, and he carried the hat across the kitchen and up the stairs. She heard him in the room above. She heard a drawer. He came back down with the hat empty and set it on the peg. "Nell," he said. The girl came in from the doorway where she had been listening the way children always are. "Go get the comb out of the top drawer in my room." The tortoiseshell one. She went. She came back holding it in both hands the way Addie had held the flour sack on the road into town. "That was your mother's," Silas said, crouching down to her. "It's yours now. You keep it in your own room where you can see it, and you tell your brother whose it was when he's old enough to ask. Because he won't remember, and you will. And that's a hard job, and I'm giving it to you because you're the only one who can do it." Nell held the comb against her chest and nodded, and did not cry, which was worse than crying. Then Silas stood up and looked at the sill. It was bare, and it was only a board with a little dust on it and the winter light coming across. "Put your bread there," he said to Addie. "It's the warmest board in the house. It's a waste of a good sill." She could not answer him. "There's a room upstairs at the end," he said, "with a window that faces the creek, and it has been shut all year. And it is a great deal better than a cold box off a kitchen where a woman can hear 9 men snoring through a wall. I'd like you in it." He picked up his hat and turned it in his hands. "Not as a cook. I can't pay you a cook's wage. I can't pay you anything for a month yet, and I have got no right to ask you for a single hour more than you have already given this family." "Then don't ask me for hours." He looked up. "Ask me for the years," Addie said. "You'll find I've got them spare." Silas Merritt crossed his kitchen and took both her hands, flour and all, and held them the way he had lifted the flour sack out of her arms in the road at Chapel Bend, like a thing that was full of eggs, and he did not say one word, and he did not need to. Behind them, in a voice that had been silent since Christmas and had apparently been listening the whole while, a small boy in the doorway said, "Addie, they were married in the front room in February with the snow up to the porch rail and Pruitt playing a fiddle badly and 7 ranch hands standing along the wall in their clean shirts. But that is not the picture to end on. The picture is this. On an evening in March with the creek loud and running and the light going long and yellow across the yard, Adelaide Merritt stood at the windowsill of her kitchen turning out 4 loaves to cool on the warm board. Behind her, Tom was under the table talking steadily to a wooden horse about nothing at all. Silas came in from the barn and hung his hat on the peg and stood a minute in the doorway, watching his wife's back and his son's boots, and did not say anything, because he had never been a man who said things. and Nell came in from the yard with the egg basket and stopped and looked at the crock on the shelf, where a scrap of paper was stuck on with flour paste, and the letters on it were crooked and one of them was backwards, and it said her name. She set the basket down and went and pressed the corner flat with her thumb, the way she did every single day, so it would not come loose.